Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Sean, aka Lord Spew. We talk shop with other creatives in animation and comics about things like finding your artistic path or the process of making art while we doodle on Magma.
We asked people on our social medias if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts. If you haven't yet, check out our Patreon and subscribe to our channel.
Please! Uh, Today we have with us Sean Buckelew. Welcome to the podcast.
Wow, thank you guys for having me.
Oh my gosh, it is an honor to have you on the pod. Especially, it's so crazy that you guys at Green Street had Scavenger's Reign and Common Side Effect coming out. Both of these shows are,
Such bangers.
they're so good.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
On the way to get to making such trailblazing shows, I want to know a little bit about your path.
Yeah, I bet it's a path that's kind of more familiar now for people kind of our generation that I
Mhm.
started. My dad got me like a copy of One Generation Off Flash, in the early 2000s, where it was like you could get when it was still Macromedia and you can get it for like $15.
Yeah.
And there was a big community of people on the internet. There was Newgrounds, but even before I maybe discovered Newgrounds, there was a site Beta, like B3TA, where there was sort of an image board where you could make GIFs. So I was like just making really shitty GIFs in Flash, and Syriac, I think, was maybe the king of that era, and stuff like that was
Oh
inspiring.
man, no
Joel
way.
Joel Beach, really deep cut, where it was kind of like using photos and like kind of Web 1.0.
Hell
And
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I made stuff on Newgrounds, and that community I think is where I learned. And I think there was a funny like evolution of that community when I was like in high school, where there was this animator, fuck, I forget his name, but he was an Australian like ex-Disney anime effects
Wait,
animator. You
we
guys
were
will know.
Is that Cloyd?
uh Chloe, we were
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
Bitey
talking
of
about
Brackenwood?
him.
Bitey
Bitey
of
Brackenwood.
Brackenwood?
So when Bitey of Brackenwood came out, it felt like I bet you so many people experienced this, where it was like the bar just went up. Everybody bought
Crazy. I was like,
yeah,
why are
like
you
this
on
is
Newgrounds?
exactly. You're
What?
like this is and I would say, I mean, like I think about this as a profound moment of like it was when professional animation bled into the
Yeah.
DIY internet flash space, which now it's like you totally take that for granted that those two spaces
Mhm.
have totally merged. But think about it, that it's like you were there when it was like, holy fuck. The other side of that too is people probably know this animator, Sick Animation, Mark M.
Hmm.
But his early stuff too was a big influence, because I felt like it was like, oh fuck, this is really. Sorry, is it okay if I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
cool.
Okay. Oh, sick. Hell yeah. Is it okay if I
Hell
smoke a fucking
shit.
cigarette?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that when I saw that stuff, that it felt like it was like, oh wow, this is like 10 times edgier than South Park, than the edgiest thing that you could have
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
access to.
I was
And
like,
it was
Aw.
just like,
I shouldn't be
yeah, he's
watching
making it.
this. Like I
Yeah,
hope
and
my
like,
parents aren't around. Yeah, yeah,
but also I was like, this is so fucking funny. And like the fact that it's unfiltered, like that alone is just like an interesting element in it. So those two things I think together were very influential on me when I was
Sure.
young. But then I went to art school in Chicago at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And it was nice. I mean, as much as I was doing this stuff on the internet, I still had like my snorkel for animation was like Pixar and maybe Akira and Miyazaki, in high school.
Mhm.
And then going to Chicago, being really introduced to like more traditional like independent animation. Like I think that's where I saw like the Man Who Planted Trees, and like
Mhm.
short films that I started to really like. And I probably also like contemporary short filmmakers that were like making work that was playing in Annecy or at Ottawa, and
Mm.
that was a totally different universe that was like also, I think, uncensored, and kind of appealed to maybe a similar feeling of why I liked. Damn, you guys are good at drawing. What appealed to the side of me that liked maybe like whatever non-commercial application
Sure.
there was out there, like Newgrounds did, but then it was this way more poetic, abstract, artistic side of it. And I worked with these two teachers. One is named Chris Sullivan, who I always have to shout out, who was making an independent feature that he spent, I think, 12 years or 15 years making this one movie called Consuming Spirits that you can rent on Vimeo on demand. That is like, it's the movie I like recommend to cinephile friends who like don't really like animation as a medium, because I'm like, check this shit out. It's sort of like the John Cassavetes of animation. It's so
Oh.
humanistic and serious. It's a very hard R. It's pretty like it's like got a pretty raw DIY technique, but I think I've never met anyone where they get to the end of that movie and they're not like, fuck, that was really like a profound piece of work.
Mm.
So I worked with him. My first job in animation was interning on that movie as a student. And I also worked with this other teacher named Jim Trainer, who, yeah, made work on using big black Sharpies on unregistered paper. So he would like just really raw,
That's living
no,
life on the edge a little bit.
exactly.
Yeah.
And was I think more of a funny writer than he was like a classical animator, but made these just really thoughtful, profound movies. Recommend. He has this movie called The Bats. I'd recommend that if anyone's trying to check out something. But yeah, I don't know. So that was sort of from the start, and then I went to grad school at Cal Arts in experimental animation, which was to me, admittedly, I think a nice way to like enter into the LA scene. Although I don't know if you necessarily need that. You
Yeah, I
know,
was wondering what that was like for you, experimental animation, because I only know a couple of people who went there. I think Kevin Manac from who I was with at Gobelin, that's where he went when he did the exchange, the Cal Arts and Gobelin exchange.
oh, okay. He went to experimental, not character.
I think so. And what would you say is the biggest difference between experimental and character at Cal Arts?
I don't know. That's kind of an interesting. I mean, that's kind of a controversial question because I feel like
Yeah.
to me the best people who come out of that out of both departments are the ones who actually kind of like struggle with that definition.
Yes, it's just how
Like,
far the pinky's out.
yeah, exactly.
Like
How big,
how artsy.
how shiny the like Pac-Man reflection is in the eye. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it's like that's the thing. It's like when I was there, I was doing narrative work, so it's like, is that experiment? Can it be experimental if it's narrative? I would
Can
say
you get
yes,
flunked
sure, of
out
course.
by not being experimental enough? Like,
Right, exactly. I mean, in that way, it's like clown college where there's no way you can
they're
fail.
like,
So,
I understood your film
yeah.
too much,
right.
so you're
That's
out.
an F. That's an F. But like when I was there, the experimental department, there was a third year student named Kangmin Kim who was making just like again like really really high craft stop motion films that were just fucking crazy, like really interesting. And then this animator Kirsten Lepore
Oh
was a
yeah.
big influence on me. So it's like, yeah, Kirsten Lepore, is she experimental or character? I mean, for example,
Story of North America.
exactly. Is that how on the spectrum of character versus experimental? I'm like, who gives a shit where that is on
Mhm.
that line? But I knew that I think that in experimental, people were character seemed like it was more focused on I want to get a job in the industry.
Sure.
Experimental seemed more open to emerging technologies and what's going like engaging in contemporary culture in a little bit more of a direct way. But then
Mm.
also I think people made, you know, sand animation and Xerox movies and, you know, nothing against those, but I'm like, it's a
Mm.
weird spectrum if you're having like a critique class where it feels like you know experimental can sometimes feel like a genre more than a oh I'm pushing the boundaries of the medium whatever.
Sure. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense.
No, yeah, totally. And especially, when you go like to like festivals and stuff, I guess that like Annecy or is these animation festivals, like you can kind of see a broad landscape, like you're saying, where it's kind of like in between, like extremely
Right,
experimental, sometimes very character driven, and
totally. And I think that it was like I went to Ottawa
mm,
between grad and undergrad, and I think that was kind of a seminal experience for like again just like exposure to like work that feels like it's artistic. It's a reminder of like, oh, you're trying to get a job, but actually like jobs aren't cool. You should do your shit, you know.
yeah.
I
And
Yeah, I remember being in art school and trying to convince other people in my class, like, dude, upload to, upload your stuff to Newgrounds, like, cause it
totally
was happening around the same time, and I remember there was this distinct like, no, I'm like making art, and Newgrounds is for curse words and stick figures, something like it was like
right, right.
it's too memey and unfiltered, and no one will
But it's also
respect me if I upload there, you know.
those people also probably wouldn't put their work on YouTube though. Like it feels like that statement would be like, I don't
Vimeo,
even want
Yeah.
to put my work on the internet. But it's like,
yeah.
man, if you put all your chips on Vimeo, you're fucked now. No, but like,
Oh, shots
um,
fired. Yeah,
but like
no, I get
it,
you.
I guess it just feels like being precious about that. On the other hand, I feel like there's this animator David O'Reilly who
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
At that time I felt like was like trying to be transgressive with like how you put work on the internet and was doing interesting experiments. When I was in grad school, he was doing kind of like WebGL experiments where it's like the launch of a short film is like a whole website. It's like a kind of choose your own adventure thing. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like trying to engage with like, this is an emerging format. It's an emerging platform. You know, if you asked me then, I would have been a psychopath about like the democratization of distribution and shit. You know, that I was like,
Hmm.
the fucking revolution's coming. And
But
then after I graduated, yeah, I just had to start doing normal freelance animation jobs, and I hated it.
when you say normal freelance like animation jobs, just to kind of clarify for the audience who might like think that it's like working for the studios, was it like uh advertisement?
Commercial,
What
yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
a
advertising studios. Like
Mm.
I was doing like literally ads. They call it cell work and ads when you do 2D animation. I don't know why. I mean, I guess because it's like animation cells. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I did this post-it note commercial that was the job that where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Where it was Post-it was making an app for your phone where you would
Oh.
take a photo of Post-it notes on the wall, and then in the app you could move them around, like, and it would like auto detect Post-it notes. And it
Mm.
just felt like it was like, but you can move Post-it notes around on the wall. Like, why? It just was so
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
you can.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, 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 no. So how long has it been since you worked like kind of like advertising, like making like ad stuff?
I I stopped doing it in 2019 because I applied for this grant called the Guggenheim or as a fellow Guggenheim Fellowship,
Hell yeah.
which is sort of more for art people. And everything about the application is like I think meant to intimidate probably people who are more on the like entertainment side of making animation. It's
Sure.
just
Mhm.
very hoity-toity. But if you can
Mhm.
get over that, I suspect that they don't get a lot of submissions that are from people who make work that's like enjoyable to look at. So
Interesting.
I think it's like if you can just swallow your pride and cross through this gamut of it's so obviously intended for people who are in academia who are
Yeah.
like professor animator types. So you have to get 4 letters of recommendation. So oof, you know, shit like that.
Who did you reach out to for the letters? Like, are you
So yeah,
like past clients or like professors? Like, what's
I reached out to Chris Sullivan. He was my initial. I reached out to the animation director who I had worked with on a couple of features. This guy Jason Carpenter, who had graduated from CalArts, who was just a
Mm.
great guy. We did this animation for a documentary about Malala Yousafzai, and it was like 25 minutes of animation for a feature. And so he was the animation director on that, and he was my buddy. Reached out to him,
Mm.
but Chris Sullivan really just encouraged me. He was like, it's just a numbers game. Don't take it personally. And I once saw an application for a grant that he had typed out on a typewriter on his desk that was
Mhm.
so good. And it wasn't like art speaky. It was just like really emotionally evocative
Yeah.
of like, this is
Mhm.
how these characters are feeling. And it was him basically saying, like, I need to make 5 minutes of this feature. It's going to cost this much money. And here's what it's going to be. It's going to be this thing that's this husband who's in this weird like polyamorous relationship, blah, blah, blah. And I was just reading it and I was like, oh man, this is what you can, you know, use to apply for a grant. So I applied for this grant and it let me basically stop doing any commercial work for like 6 months. And then
Hell
by the
yeah.
time that was over, the Scavenger show was starting.
So
But at the beginning of that grant, I was like, I'm making a promise to myself that I'm going to try to stop doing
I think you
advertisements.
dodged a bullet because currently, if you do ad stuff, I just came off of some ad stuff
Yeah.
because of how many aspect ratios there are. Like
Oh my God.
the whole even planning of it has
Yeah.
changed. And this is for people listening too. If you want to get into ad stuff, basically you have to storyboard everything in a square with aspect ratio guides to make sure that all of the most important stuff happens in the middle of all these of this
Because you have to
square
do
four
16
by
9 and
five.
9 16 and 4
Yep.
by 5. Oh my
Yep,
God. This just
and
isn't this isn't
sometimes they want square too. It's great. It's like 50 exports. It's so, and if they give you notes, you have to export all of them again. It's I'm I'm glad you got out. No, I mean,
Well,
you know.
it's funny you say that because I do think that there's this thing where there was a nice period. I feel happy now to have been a student as much as I just shit on Vimeo a second ago. I'm happy to have been around in a certain period of making student work uh, when that was a kind of dominant platform
Yeah.
because it feels like I'm not envious of people where it's like the dominant platforms are such short attention span. At least Vimeo was like make an
Mhm.
artful short film, or whatever, or Newgrounds or YouTube. Like it's about making a compelling short film. Now it does feel like it's like if I were a student, I'd be like, you have to make work for TikTok or Instagram. You're fucked if you don't.
Yeah, your
You're
thesis
fighting against
film
the
is 15
tide.
seconds long. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's 15 seconds long, and honestly, you should think about it vertically oriented. And I say that, and I want to throw up in my mouth because I'm like, it ain't
I'm
cinema.
waiting, dude. I'm waiting for that vertical theater. I'm waiting for the first
God,
the first
You know,
like film fest that's all in vertical, and
yeah,
all the like really nice cameras. You have to like film
not
it
a bad
sideways.
idea. Yeah,
but I had a friend, I have a friend that I talked to yesterday, and she's telling me she wants to do like a little bit of like a live action short, and she's like, I don't know if I should do it landscape or portrait, and I'm like, I was like, I hate to say this, but you might have want to think about doing it portrait,
I know.
but I don't know. It's
I
Does
not
think
like
editing for
yeah,
both make you want to throw up? Yes.
yeah, and also like, and I guess it's also like, accept that like if you're starting out, you've got to play the game of the dominant platform. I
Mhm.
don't think that's too cynical thing of too cynical of a thing to say.
Yeah.
But like it'd be like if you were starting out in media, I wouldn't immediately say you should write a play. It's like you should probably think about where you fit into contemporary culture. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
We sorry. We got distracted by advertising, but then you got out of that uh artsy program. You got out of the artsy program. It saved you, and then
yeah,
some shit went down in a good way.
yeah, and then yeah. So post Guggenheim, I was working on a short, and then the pandemic hit, and I was very happy to have kind of a short film that was sort of funded that gave me a lot of structure.
Mhm.
And Joe Bennett and I decided to kind of bubble together and move into a studio space just to like save our sanity. And
Mhm.
that was kind of Green Street Pictures 1.0.
Is that the best decision you ever made? Is that if you can go through your yeah no no
I think so. Well, I think about if I think about there were certain moments when we were starting and trying to maybe when we first started, it's the two of us are just sharing a space and it's kind of as simple as that.
yeah
But there was this ambition to do a studio proper. And when we rented the second space, it was kind of right on the verge of Scavengers getting greenlit. But I think a key
Mm.
thing that I think about a lot, and Joe and I talk about a lot, is that we committed to this bigger space, and it was the space that was going to host like Benji, the supervising director, and up to like 3 or 4 artists, and we were going to host the writers' room there. But we booked this space before we had actually gotten the show greenlit, and it was
Oh.
like very diarrhea inducing to actually sign this lease and go like, we're on the hook for a lot of money. But once we did it and then we had the space, it was like we needed to have done the space because I think that if the show got greenlit and we didn't have the space, we wouldn't have been allowed to host it there. It was like we had to go like, guys, we already rented the space, and they go, oh, okay, then we have to play ball and cover your overhead and stuff. So
Oh,
that
that's
was, I think, a very critical
smart.
moment of like it was maybe almost the worst decision of my entire life until it became the best decision, and then since then it's been easier and easier, I'd say, to do it all.
That's so scary. That reminds me a lot of when I read Bakuman, which is a manga about mangakas like running their like getting a series picked up and then actually drawing and like writing it.
Yeah,
Apparently when their series get picked up, they start in a deficit because they have to rent the space and pay all of the assistants. And then
right.
if their manga runs long enough, then
Then you go
uh
into the black,
you
but
go, yeah, you go into profits. Yeah, yeah, you actually make money. And so it's kind of crazy that you guys kind of sort of did that because it's like, okay, you booked the space before the show got greenlit.
yeah, we had this
Whoa.
joke that it was all horse, no cart.
Ah!
I felt like it was like we just didn't know what we were doing. I feel like you see a lot of companies and startups where they take capital investment and build a
Uh-huh.
lot of cart, but then when it comes to actually making stuff, that's where it's the least engaged. And
Uh-huh.
then I felt like we like were very confident about making stuff, but the building the cart part, we're like,
Yeah.
we're so fucking stupid. We have no idea what we're
Yeah.
doing.
The cool thing about a horse is it still go. They still go
Exactly.
without
Yeah.
Yeah,
the cart. Cart is basically house until horse attached.
exactly. Cart, yeah, cart is just box with wheels.
So when you guys were in the first location, it was because I feel like I heard that it wasn't just you two, right? You started bringing a couple people in, right, to help
That was
out?
probably the second one. The first one was literally just Joe and I, and it was like
Oh,
a 200 square foot place.
okay,
The
okay.
second one is where people and nobody really saw it, 'cause the first one, because it was really in the pandemic.
So you had three spaces total, and I've seen
We're
the third
You've
space,
seen the
right?
third, and
Okay.
the second one other people have seen because we did
Hmm.
it was big enough for maybe like 5 or 6 people to work out of it at a given moment.
Right, okay, okay.
But it was fun. Yeah.
And when you were in your first space at the time, so you were working on the short, is it the short with the car and the Roomba and all the like automate like basically quote unquote
Yeah.
robots
It was
having
that was actually a commission for FX that I
okay.
did. I pitched it when I was in that space, and I think I finished it in the second space. I was also working on the short film called Drone. That's what I was finishing up when we
Mm,
were kind of I finished that maybe 4 months before Scavenger started. And then but then also, I mean, there was this is jumping into common side effect stuff, but there's this thing that the first like 5 or 6 minutes of common side effects we animated back in 2020, and it was like the proof of concept to sell the show, and it was just me, Joe, and Wes McLean, the art director,
no
and
way.
that was done in the first space before Scavengers got greenlit. We had that first 5 minutes in the can.
That's
And so, yeah,
crazy.
very weird. The timeline of all of it is very weird. And it was like the show had been passed on by another network. And so it was part of like kind of retooling it for a new pitch
Oh
for
shit.
Max Adult Swim. So
Mm.
very weird. But again, I think a new Groundsian spirit of like,
Let's
let's
just
just
make
fucking
it.
make something to show again. I like this thing of like, you know what? This tone is always going to be confusing on the
Mm.
page. Let us just make something and it'll be really crystal clear why it's funny.
What
That's really interesting to hear because I feel like I don't know. I always thought from an external point of view, I was like, well, you guys had Steve Healy like writing with y'all. Like that's a big name. I thought that was kind of like the selling point,
Oh
but
yeah, and
no, you
We had Mike Judge too,
and
which
you
you'd
had
think we
Mike
would.
Judge.
yeah.
But it was still, I think that that stuff. I mean, those Steve is a genius. I love Steve, and Mike obviously is does lend it so much credibility. But I still think at the end of the day, if people are reading pages, script pages, that they're like, yeah, this isn't hard funny. Like
Mm-hmm.
that there's just a million reasons to say no to a thing that's like tonally maybe a little bit not what you're
Mm-hmm.
used to.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I think if you send somebody a link to a short film that's good and compelling, nobody notes up a thing that they like. You
Yeah.
know, they
Yeah.
go, "Oh, this is funny."
Yeah. Was it jarring for to have you because you were making just a bunch of films about not alive stuff, and then all of a sudden you had to make stuff about like characters. Like you were making all this stuff about like robots and Roombas and
Yeah.
airplanes and stuff.
To
was
then
it did it
do,
feel good to suddenly animate or make stuff with peoples?
I think so, definitely. I mean, I also think, I mean, the biggest joy of it all is like working with Steve's writing
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
is a very inspiring thing to just be like, I don't know. You guys probably have this all the time where it's like writers who are just like, yeah, I need an animator to do all the hard work when the
Mm-hmm.
writing isn't very good. It's pretty rare that you're like, this writing is compelling me to like try to bring my A game because it's so good. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, definitely it was fun to get out of the thematic world of everything is about robots and AI. It's funny too because I felt like I was into that stuff before it all like went to hell kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the interest arose pre ChatGPT, and now I feel like I'm like, oh, I would never want to work in that world again because it's so
You know,
on everyone's mind. It's impossible not to be really cynical.
I had a thought like that recently because I had a pitch for a comic that I had sent like a publisher and stuff, and it was all about like robots and AI and stuff. It was kind of like a dystopia, whatever. And then now I'm like, I don't know if I want to pursue this pitch anymore.
Like, do you
Just
want to live in that world for
yeah,
3 years?
is this, yeah, I don't know. It's too real now. I was gonna also ask you, so when you and Joe were in the first space, so you were working on two shorts, and you were already working on Common Side Effects, which that is crazy. I didn't realize it was all the way back then. And Scavenger's Reign. What else were you guys working on? Because I know that Joe has a million little shorts with FX, you know.
Yeah, he was doing that. I'm trying to think. I was developing a show that now is with Netflix,
Ooh,
in development
that's
that
exciting.
I think I can't really talk about it, but
Yeah.
it's the show I would most want to make for like a thematic world that I would want to live in. It's about like computer, it's sort of about Second Life.
Oh, cool.
It's a
Ooh,
show that will
cool.
be so hard to make. It's such a complex show. And again, I think like Common Side Effects, it's like tonally it's like sort of an investigation show, but it's funny, but then it's got earnest moments and it's got drama and it's got action and like I don't know. So yeah, we'll see. But so there's some scripts for that and so that was in the early stages of development in this same space. And then yeah, I don't know. And like Scavengers the process took a really long time. If you track the short to the
Mhm.
to the pilot to the show, it was like the short was 2017, the pilot was 2018, then the show didn't get started till 2020, late 2021 or 2022 maybe. Um, so everything took a long time, but in the middle it was like while we were in that space 1.0, we wrote episode 2 and 3 for Max because the pilot was done for a while at that point. Did that make sense what I just
Yeah.
said?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think what's really interesting is how many ideas you guys were juggling. Because I feel like when I talk to friends or even myself, like pitching shows or whatever, I it's so hard to have to do more than
Yeah,
one or two creative ideas. I feel like two is already kind of like
Pushing
you're
it too far.
tough.
stretched in. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like and it's hard to know how to divide your attention between the projects. So how did you guys work on multiple projects? Was it kind of like, okay, for a couple of months, just this one? Is it across the week? Like, I know it's kind of very much in the weeds of a question, but
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, I feel like it's something that I used to be really bad at. That was like, I was kind of a one project at a time
hmm
guy. I learned a lot from Joe because Joe is very much, I've got a bunch of things cooking at once.
mm,
Um, and now I feel like I've learned, I mean, I think it is a little bit of like just having to like bifurcate your brain where you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to like, I'm in this now and I'm going to catch up with it. I mean, the number of projects in development at Green Street right now is so it's really stressful. And when I talk to friends about it, it does seem like it's like, I don't think this always used to be how it worked. It's like, this is
Yeah.
hmm
emblematic of this period being kind of shitty for animation that it's like, yeah, you got to just have a million irons in the fire if you want one to see the light of day.
So everything takes
So
so long. Like you might take a
that too,
year.
yeah.
It might take a year after you submit something for them to get like focus back on it again. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So like, yeah, I don't know. It's maybe emblematic of a bad time, but then I don't know. But then on the other hand, it's like I've started to enjoy it more where it's like at the studio we have like dramatic stuff that is really serious, but then we're doing something that's like a really dumb light comedy. And so it's like it's kind of fun to just like, okay, now I get to dip into the really dumb side of things for the afternoon, and that's fun. And it's also like there's so much more collaborative development now, so it feels like it's like in each of these where before I felt like it's like harder for me to just jump between a bunch of different projects when I'm
Yeah.
alone or a room. But once it can be like I get to hop into a room with James and Benji and we're writing on our stupid diarrhea idea, and we're just
hmm
laughing and we're watching YouTube videos. Then it just feels like this is work, but it's like I'm not like getting stressed out or feeling like, oh fuck, I'm stretched in so many different
What
directions.
does it feel like to be somebody that started off in art and it seems like your focus has drifted more to writing?
Yeah.
What's that journey been like for you as far as like basically catching up to other trying to catch up to other writers that you're working as a peer with or whatever, that's probably intimidating. But also,
Yeah,
like noticing that you're drawing less, maybe.
definitely drawing less. And I think that, I don't know, it's like there's an element of it that's like not super self-conscious because you sort of just drift into whatever you're doing. And like
Sure.
I just sort of found myself writing more and enjoying that more and feeling like, oh, actually ideas are getting down for me in a better way in this medium than they ever have before because it's feeling like the skill is sharpening a little bit. So I'm like, I can get better at telling if something is going to work or not in writing. And it's great coming from doing animation by myself. It's like, oh man, it's nice to run through shitty ideas faster in this period
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
than it is
Yeah.
to yeah. And then I think it's like the two intimidating parts is like when I was writing on Scavengers, I had no fucking clue what I was doing. But I felt like I was like, but what do I do know how to do? I know how to make things. I feel like a creative person, so let me try to get good enough at writing that it isn't inhibiting the
Mhm.
flow of like thinking about this more as a director or just a filmmaker in general.
You remember like an
Uh,
early lesson that like as
I
you were
mean,
in those rooms?
I had to learn how to use Final Draft for the
Okay,
Scavengers room.
that's an early
So
lesson, yeah.
yeah, and like I mean, lucky for me, I was an EP on that show. So like the writer in the room that maybe would have made me feel stupid wasn't allowed to make me feel stupid or she'd get fired. No, just kidding. But
Oh my
like
god.
she was like a total sweetheart about it. And like I think it was also like I would admit readily to what I didn't know. I think that's an important thing. Like, be confident in what you're good at, but then there's no shame in saying like, "Oh yeah, how do you format it when blah 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 blah?" Or like, is there a better way to do this kind of thing? And but then I think you also learn that like, I don't know, nobody knows what they're doing. Like everyone, you feel that imposter syndrome, but I also feel like everyone's faking it. I think writers are conscious of faking it because the material of writing is so cheap and anyone can do it. So there's sort of a feeling of like, if anyone can do it, how do you distinguish,
Hmm.
yourself? And so I don't know. It's like, plus, I would also say Scavengers was easy because there was such a good team working behind the writers. So it was like you could have confidence that you just needed to convey these words to be understood by another animator who would then take it to a higher level. And so I think once that like rhythm and confidence got built up, it's like, if I'm handing my script to Vincent Swee, who's just the fucking best director ever, like I'm really the script is communicating to him, and he's an animator who I know, so I can write stuff for him. That's not as hard as I'm Aaron Sorkin trying to write a drama about the White House, and it's got to be snappy and
That's
whatever.
so funny. Yeah, that's such
Yeah.
a funny. It's funny that you bring up Aaron Sorkin just because we had a guest, Danny Hines, who's doing a web comic about like what if Aaron Sorkin's was a comic, like
If
a Sunday
Oh, like
Funnies
his
comic
medium
artist.
of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's so funny.
It's really
Walk
fun.
and talk, but it's Garfield.
Eh. I think that's so cool that you think about the process that way as well. And
Yeah.
that's really rare that a writer can write for his director's sensibilities because that shows that there's a deep connection between the members of a production. And that's yeah, it's pretty rare.
It's pretty
Uh,
yeah. I and it's rare. It's sort of the experience that was on Common Side Effects too, and I think it's sort of a cornerstone of Green Street. Hopefully, is trying to like
mhm.
intermesh those things. Don't like try to untangle it to not feel like an assembly line. And I think
Right.
also like there's a version of that where I think it's messy and it's like exploitative, but then I think there's also a version of it where it's just like, no, you can get inspired and it's things
Yeah.
are things are speaking to each other. So you go, oh, this works really well. And so, oh, I can do this more because like the artists are responding to it. And yeah, I don't know. It seems
Yeah.
I think
seems
it's so
natural.
true what you just brought up that like it's messy because it can be both really inspiring and exciting, but also you said exploitative. And I think it's interesting to think about because when you're in college working on your thesis film and you're putting everything into your art piece, yeah, you're having so much fun. And when you can fit into a project like that as an artist in as a professional, it's so exciting. but it's so hard to find the right people who would like that
Yeah.
environment. And it's interesting that you bring that up because talking with one of the animator story artists, Eric Bradford, he was kind of describing
Yeah.
that process to me. And it's and we talked about it a little bit with Benji on the podcast. So for everybody listening to this episode, make sure to check out Benji's episode. What's your I guess what how do you foster an environment where you can kind of work past just the definition of your job and kind of like have this kind of interconnection between the different jobs, I guess, of the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's nice for me because I like jumping between things, and I feel like my purview now at the studio like allows me to,
Hmm.
because it's like, I mean, just because it's fun to be able to just hop into any room. I mean, it was great on Common Side Effects that like I was
Hmm.
off the show for maybe 3 months, but I could still just dip into edits on my episode. I animated on it in post production just because
Oh,
I was
that's
like,
sick.
fuck it.
That
Like
is
if
cool.
it's my episodes, like why not? Like it's for the benefit of the whole thing. So I'm happy to do that. And frankly, I mean, it's like, I mean, Sean, to your question earlier, like it's sort of like I missed animating, so I'm like, fuck this, I'm gonna get dirty and do some animating and get in there. And I think that it's like I also feel though like it's like I have a short film that I'm making about 9/11 that it's like this to excise something where I'm like I do still need to draw, so I wrote the script but wrote it pretty quickly, and the process for actually making it was way more in storyboarding because I was
Hmm.
like, this is where I really want to discover the story, and I'm going to take a long time with boarding. It's a half-hour project, and it took me like probably like 9 months to board, just slowly. And again, it's for fun. It's for goofs, like all shorts about 9/11.
No.
But it was like, I feel like it's like when I've been writing and in development too much, all I want to do is sort of direct. And then when I'm in the like slog of like post-production on a show, all I want to do is write and develop. So it's a never-ending cycle of not wanting to do the thing you're actually doing.
Well,
Uh,
animation is in itself, making a short is like 10 jobs, and so we get
Right.
spoiled being able to do all those jobs and having control over it, and you start missing the other stuff.
I know. And I think it goes both ways too, where I'm also like I'm sensitive myself to being exploited. So I have that thing of kind of like, nope, I'm only doing this one thing and it shuts off, even though part of my brain is like, oh, but I want to write some lines here. I'm
mhm.
like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm a storyboard artist, not under my purview. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, but I think that you can do a thing where it feels like, I mean, there's a thing at Green Street where so many people are remote too, that it's like trying to like have digital spaces where people can collaborate, and that like always having it where like when something good or exciting happens, everybody gets to see it. There's a lot of sharing because on productions I've been in before, there was so much siloing, and I was just like, well, don't do that.
Mhm.
Like people get excited by like the bar can naturally get raised in a fun, competitive way that I think is really nice, where it's like a storyboard artist doesn't see. I mean, it happened a lot on Common Side Effects where a storyboard artist on another episode would do a sequence. It would ricochet through all the teams, and it would just be like, now this is sick. Like this is something we should all try to do. This is now the gold standard for the show tonally, and we all learn. And then it's this evolving organism of like what is the essence of the show, and it's this hive mind. And Joe will send a music track into the chat, and then it's like, okay, it's swirling all over again. Everyone's getting ideas. So I don't know. It's like that's it, firing on all cylinders in a fun way. I don't know if I'm even answering a question at this point.
No,
That's
it's really
no, it's
cool. It reminds me a lot of college in the way where like, like I have this like nostalgia for college where like you're all in the room and you're trying to make stuff and you want to make the best stuff that you can and
Yeah.
there's kind of this like friendly competition.
And don't you feel like in college, it's like teachers don't teach you shit. I mean, teachers can teach you
Yeah.
some stuff, but the real stuff that happens is like in the computer labs where somebody
Yeah.
figures out how to do something, and then it's like you don't even realize how much you're absorbing through osmosis of just being around your
yeah.
friends and seeing what they do, and then they're absorbing it
Yeah.
from you. And I don't know, it's like I do think that there's something to that, and it's probably impossible to recreate in a professional environment, but maybe the closer you can get to
Hmm.
trace elements of, oh, I'm seeing what's possible, and I'm seeing, oh, this comper is doing something really interesting, and the team feels integrated in a way where I'm like part of that process too, or I could just reach out to him on chat and say, yo, What blur are you using on that? It looks better than my blur.
So what's even the starting point for going into all this? Because had you worked on any other shows before this? Just all of a sudden you guys were making your own thing, and you're just thrust into like,
Yeah.
what
It
was
was a
that
mix
like trying to
of,
build it from the ground up, not having worked on
well,
it?
two things. I mean, I would say the Scavenger show was a co-production with Titmouse,
Hmm.
and they were great. And it was like, you know, the perfect people for our first show. I had done the pilot, which was fully at Titmouse and was pre Green Street. So it was like I'd met Chris then and people there and Antonio, and it was really great. But then yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a mix of being stupid and but also just feeling like, I don't know, well, you'll figure it out. Like
Well,
the hard part feels like it should be the creative part, and other stuff it feels like you could figure out. But then I'd also say the third partner at the company early on was this guy James Merrill, who had been a producer at Bento and was a writer too. So he wrote on Scavengers and then is the supervising producer of our studio. And it's like, oh, we'd be fucked without him. Like he's the one who actually does the numbers. I can't do a budget for shit. But so there was some element of like, we have the person who actually knows how to do this. We're just going through it on Scavengers with like safety, like with like floaties or like training wheels or something. And then on Common Side Effects, I felt like we were kind of ready to be like, I've seen the kinks in the previous system. Now that we have it ourselves, can we course correct some of those things that just felt like this is where we ran into problems? What can we do in our approach that would mediate some of these problems in a way that feels like we're nimble enough that we can adjust our pipeline before we even get started? And you know, things go wrong in unpredictable ways, but I feel like it's getting easier and easier of like this part feels, you know, when you get color footage back, now I know how that feels and it feels very bad, you know, and it's like, oh, the first time through, I was like, this is a nightmare. The second time through, I'm like, this seems to be sort of normal and I can deal with it. You know, it's the same feeling of like when you hear about filmmakers where they're like, when I do my first rough assembly, I throw up. And you're like, okay, I'm starting to understand the ebbs and flows of this process more and more each time. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess there was a theory of I think the way that we're making independent shorts with our friends with or like our FX shorts with little budgets, you could
Mhm.
scale this to a TV show and it wouldn't break. And for Scavengers, for example, it was like none of the directors had ever directed TV. We'd never written TV. But then
Mhm.
I don't know, it's like that leads to good results of like, but I trust these people as filmmakers, so I don't see what could quite go wrong. And then when it
Mhm.
happened, it's like I think everyone had a learning curve of like, oh, this schedule is fucking crazy. That puts limits on how I approach this that maybe wouldn't be the same as if I was just working alone. But everyone adapted, and then it's like, oh, I'm really glad we picked people whose filmmaking sensibilities we trusted and didn't just go based on
that makes
how many
sense.
episodes of TV they had directed. And same for me that I'm like, I'm glad that somebody took a chance on me when I didn't have a lot of credits because it would have been very easy not to. So, you know,
Mhm.
but then it's like, hopefully it's borne out in the results that like, oh, but we were ready to get into it, you know, and figure out the process.
That's really cool. There's so many things that I want to explore in all of this. I think it's just so cool that they're like building a studio and having a say in all of these processes that you mentioned that you had James to kind of like help you figure out and like maybe redistribute the money where you think it would work better. I want to talk a little bit about the FX shorts. Can we ask, it's okay if you can't say, but can we ask how, like, approximately ballpark kind of what the budget was like for each of these?
Yeah, it was all in 50K for all three,
Okay,
which is great. I mean,
that's
Yeah,
good.
that
Yeah,
is pretty good.
that is a pretty good amount of money because Sean and I
yeah,
did the Adult Swim Smalls, and these are but yours are longer, right? The FX shorts, they're like
it's
five
like
to seven
it's
minutes.
each one is like 2.5 minutes. So I think the whole thing is like 7.5 minutes altogether.
Oh, that's really good.
But
It's really
but it
good. I
was
want to throw up
what
because of our
that
budget.
that
Yeah.
I know. Well, do you feel though like it's like in that space there's this sliding scale of budget where it's like the less money, the less anyone's gonna say anything about it, and the more
Yes,
money, the more it's
Yes.
like,
of
yeah.
course.
So I didn't get screwed or anything. I also felt like I was like I I drove the number higher because I was daytime working full time on
Sure.
Scavengers, writing and doing stuff.
Mhm.
So I was like, I can't my regret with that is that I basically had to spend all the money on other people working on it. I just boarded it and didn't do much else just because I didn't have the time. Which I don't know. That I felt, to be honest, I felt stressed out when I was doing that because I was like, I do not have a grip on this. I animated some stuff maybe, but it just felt like it was like I'm baking in limitations into this because I know that I'm not going to have time. So stuff like you don't ever see any of the human faces.
Hmm.
No humans ever talk. There's no lip sync. It's like these were intentional because I was like, this has to be a little bit automated. I knew that I couldn't do. I worked with a studio in Montreal to do the CG for the drone short, and they did the CG for the
Hmm.
car and the
Yeah.
Roomba and the robot short. So and also like I'm like it was at a phase where I was just like I suck at drawing backgrounds. I can't do this anymore. I liked working with Wes so much on drone. So the art director on those FX shorts also is the art director on Common Side Effects now. And it's just like, okay, I just need him. He's getting more expensive, which is great. But then it's yeah, so the payoff was, and my friend Jeanette produced it, and I was just like, I need an actual producer. I can't self-produce this because yeah, I don't have the bandwidth, and I didn't pay myself anything for it. So that was the exchange. It's like I'm going to spend all this money to hire other people, and when
Yeah.
you're making stuff in the context of you're not putting your own sweat equity into it, it's like, oh, if you're not fucking people over, it gets expensive so fast. Whereas
Right.
ideally for $10,000 you can do something crazy looking because you can put your time into it and that can like pay your rent, and that's like a model of doing things that can work.
Yeah, you can exploit yourself.
Exactly,
And
but
yeah,
you get to benefit from it so it feels less gross.
for
Hmm.
sure.
No,
um
that's so true.
but
Doing
yeah,
doing these like shorts is it's so like everything you brought up is so on point because I feel like for Sam and I making High Moon Queen is was the same. We didn't pay ourselves because we spent all the money on on our animators
yeah,
and the voice actors and
this
the
is the curse
yeah.
of being, that you like what you do or something, that
Yeah.
you'll fuck yourself over, where I imagine a lawyer would never do this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, never. Yeah, yeah. Like actually when we told our manager, he was like, "You did what?"
Yeah. But look, I think that like there's some element of like, I mean, you guys like know this, like pitching a show, it's like it's a totally unfair system that where you get exploited,
Mhm.
you have to do so much work for free. And I think that for better and for worse, it's like the people who I think dig their heels in and say, I won't ever do that part of it. Like it's harder, I think, actually, in the long run to never throw yourself in. I mean, the Scavenger short was the same thing. It was a really low budget. Nobody cared what it was. They were shocked when they discovered it was what it was.
Mm.
Joe and Charles had enough money to hire like three friends to do little animated bits. I animated probably like 30 seconds on that short. And, it's like if they didn't do that, then they never would have gotten the show. You
Right.
need to do it at that early stage, even though it's like, if you're looking at it objectively, you go, boy, this company's really taking advantage of young, hungry artists.
I this is so true, and it's kind of like you're saying. There's this element that is like it sucks that it's the reality because obviously we would all want to be paid da da da, but it is kind of inspiring and or I guess reassuring to hear that even shows that have like beautiful art, super interesting ideas, you still need to make the thing to sell it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel like I thought that pitching because when you go to like workshops or whatever or like even school they're like yeah just a pitch bible whatever and it's like I don't think we can sell shows like this anymore
I know.
with
I
just
think
the pitch.
nobody knows how to sell a show anymore. It's the fucking Wild West out there.
Right? I don't know. I mean, it sucks to say, but like, I think, but that's why like these tiny shorts program, like the FX program, the Adult Swim Smalls program, or
Mhm.
whatever, whoever studio decides that they have a couple extra, I don't know, $1 million laying around that they want to throw at
Yeah.
artists to make pilots. Like, I mean, and it's funny because they don't want to call it pilots because if it's a pilot, it means there's a show to be greenlit. But if they
Right.
call them shorts,
It's a different, yeah. But I would say,
yeah.
I mean, the Adult Swim Smalls program, like produce, like I'm friends with Joe Kappa, and
Hmm.
his haha you clowns shorts
So
were Adult
funny.
Swim shorts, and now they're turning into a show. And
Right.
Hmm.
I don't know. To me, I'm like, isn't that absolutely this process working the way it's supposed to? You know, in a good way
Yeah.
of
Right.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
where you test it out, and those are so good. Let's make the show. You know.
Hmm. I'm gonna start sprinkling in some questions from the listeners because we
Okay,
have
cool.
a
Yeah,
lot. Our patron Claire Rosenthal asks, did unexpected hurdles happen during the production of Scavenger's Reign or common side effects?
definitely. I think Scavengers, I felt like there was just a lot of learning for the first time how everything works. So I think there's probably stuff that because it happened in the same way on Common Side Effects, it would be like I would now say it's not an unexpected hurdle. It's just a normal
Hmm.
thing that happens. Some things get fucked up, and that's okay, and that's part of the process. That's not a failure of the process. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like the unexpected hurdle on both was like everything is hard to get good in execution. And like, I think that there's a real emphasis on like, there's a lot that happens after writing that's still story work to get it working.
Hmm.
Just an example, when I was directing on Common Side Effects, there's this character named Zane who's Marshall's half brother. And I would say that he went through like 5 different iterations in boards that really changed the
Oh.
story, just because I felt like there was sort of a like, okay, we're executing this original version of Zane and it's just not working. And instead of trying to work and rework, we're gonna blue sky this and do a new version of the character. And work having hitting that kind of hurdle when you're in the middle of boarding an episode is really stressful. But
Hmm.
then when it creatively ends up being the best solution and you're happy, then you're like, I'm glad that we
Yeah.
took the time to make that right because then there's Zane scenes in future episodes that are just like my favorite scenes in the whole show.
What was the process
Um,
like to crack that? Like, was there like a certain approach that where it clicked?
yeah, I mean, I think it was like I think we took a stab at a version. It like changed once slightly, just the like interpretation of the character, and then he was sort of more of a like sleazy ratty guy.
Hmm.
And then it became the like Joe did the drawing of guy in his undies on the ground wearing like a Christmas sweater with like bleached hair.
Is more
And I think that
likable.
more likable. And I think to what you were saying earlier, like that evoked like this guy definitely does drugs, like as opposed to a lot of other characters, like he is a like recreational drug user. So then it became this, and then it was I don't know a lot of. I gotta say it was really fun because it was me and Benji and Joe just spending an afternoon going like we gotta crack this fucking thing just in thumbs. And again, I think this speaks to the end to end of like we can crack open Premiere and start editing as we do it. Like let's not be precious. And then we licensed this song. Fuck, I forget the artist, French artist, kind of electronic song. But it
Oh,
was like,
Jean-Michel Jarre?
yeah, yeah,
No way.
yeah.
No way. Oh my God,
So
that's so deep cut.
so that song came into the process when we were in this day of trying to crack the character. And it was like, let's just try this scene with this song over. And then it
Oh,
was
that's
like, oh
sick.
fuck, okay, it's all unlocking now. And it's like we're rewriting the scene
I love
and
how
then
much you
yeah.
guys use music in
So
because I
fun.
feel like Scavenger's Reign and Common Side Effects both have music tracks that are so specific and cool, and it's so exciting when you see a show that's not just reverting back to like, oh, the same. I feel like sometimes when you watch a lot of TV, you can feel like, oh yeah, it's like these 5 tracks that you know because that's the
Right.
happy track, that's the going to war track, that's the
Yeah,
heist
yeah,
track,
yeah.
you know, like. And it's like it's cool that you guys kind of subvert expectations with music in that way.
And I think I mean, this is really credit to Joe that he is an animatic song picker. Like, like he's like that movie Beautiful Mind, where
Uh-huh.
like it's like da 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 da. He's like, so
He's
if you're in
going
it,
through. Yeah.
yeah, that if you're in an animatic edit with him, he'll go like, okay, it's the Edward Scissorhands soundtrack, track 5, like started at like
Oh,
second 30. I mean, it is like that kind of like
Jesus.
savant style.
That's
And
so
but
sick.
so I think it does the thing where it's like the the animatic edits have a lot of temp music, which is people say that it's maybe a no-no in a certain way because it can dictate the mood too strongly. But I
hmm,
think what it does is it's got rhythms built in that have a kind of like musical bass line that then when the
yes.
actual composer comes in, I mean, shout out Nick Snyder, our actual composer. He's like no, I can make this my own, but
Yeah.
it's helpful to just be able to hit these same rhythms because like having
Hmm.
strong musical rhythms is better than I see the alternate maybe is just like music is this blanket that you put over a thing that like music and the timing of the animation
Yeah.
doesn't have a relationship. So I feel like it's like
Yeah.
nice for our process of like we're doing this energetic scene. Okay, let's put this song on it, and then you go, oh, a bunch of things might work in the like in the context of having this music to drive the tone. That if I watch this silent, I would be like, it's still not working.
Yeah,
It's
you might
boring.
you might be able to give that to somebody, and then they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna replicate this at the same tempo, but this informs me that we should have aggressive drums, but a silly melody." And like that's like,
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that like you guys really workshopped this vein because he's one of my favorite characters. He's so funny. I don't know. I love
he is really
stoners,
funny.
so yeah, he's so great.
He's
uh,
great. Eric
Eric
Bradford did a
Bradford
lot.
is
He did a lot of the Zane stuff in
this guy. He's
two of my
so fucking
episodes.
good.
He animated
So
that shot.
good.
That's maybe my favorite shot in the whole season when Zane pulls his undies out of his crack.
Yeah.
And he's got like a swordfish tattoo on his ass. And again, I'm
God.
like I think Eric just came up with that, and it's like, okay, dude, let it rip. Like that's so funny. Like I think that's the other thing is like when you have talented people, like don't tell them
Yeah.
no and give them a long leash. Like another story from Common Side Effects that's like that is there's a scene in the sixth episode, spoilers, where Marshall goes to jail, and it was this storyboarder's Neil who just like I think had a thing of like I have a take on this and did the whole sequence, and it the sequence in its first incarnation I saw it was the same sequence that was in the final
Oh
show.
man, that's so cool.
Wow, that
Yeah,
is so cool.
and it's like he had an idea and let him rip. You don't need to over direct this. You don't even need to check in on him and see if it's going okay because I feel like it's just like have the trust. It'll be interesting. Don't worry. Let him cook.
When you have artists like that, it's the best. I can't really say what I worked on with Eric, obviously, but working with
Yeah.
Eric is so fun, and we would talk a lot, and it was so inspiring talking with him because after being in animation for a while, when you there's a moment, you kind of start becoming a cog in the machine, and you're like, oh, this is the speeding, and we do that, and these are the steps, and like boom,
Right.
boom, boom, this is the formula for, and I don't know, working with Eric, I was like, it doesn't gotta be this way.
I
Oh, we can be
know.
passionate and excited. It's really
I
fun.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a question from Don't Have to Write Me a Letter on YouTube. They ask, are there any plans for season 2 of Common Side Effects? And if you can't answer that, what character is your favorite character?
I don't think I don't have any news for them
Mm-hmm.
on the second season, other than to just say we want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
If people watching, if people watch, hopefully we can do it. My favorite character, I think, is probably Rick, because I feel like
He
who's the
is so
CEO character.
funny.
I
Yeah.
just think
Yeah.
every time he shows up, his like bit is always it's so fun, and he's like the most lovable, hateable guy in the world. And I think that I had this thing where when we were doing table reads, Mike Judge would show up to the table read. It was just incredible to see like I'm a Mike Judge fan, so I feel like I was like starstruck when he would show up. But then when he would do lines, I would just be like, "You're a fucking genius. These lines coming out of your mouth are so funny when it's you. Like you just have, and like maybe you're just giving that voice the benefit of the doubt in a way that you don't for other people. But I'm like, you just have a magic voice that makes everything funny, you know? And and then that character, I don't know. It's like I think he's a very compelling. Like I think it's like I don't like doing it where you this is a credit to the writing, but like when you do a devil's advocate character for kind of an evil villain and you try to make them more dimensional, just because like that's more compelling on a story level, that I feel like it's like Rick is so evil in a mundane way and in a
Mm-hmm.
believable way. There's something that I like about it where it's like it never is trying to like rationalize his evilness, but he's a normal guy and you're like, I kind of feel for him. He seems like he's just like it's just like if there ever was a spirit in him, it's been crushed. And to me, that makes him very funny.
Yeah.
But also, it's funny because there was a serious conversation and intervention about how many like neck rolls he would have when he would turn it, just because we were like, we really want to dial in like the thickness of Rick's neck, so that when he's stretching his neck, it's just like that kind of like oh, it's just the awkwardness of him I don't know, having just a weirdly thick neck.
It's also really funny because he's like he does it. Oh, I don't know. I forget what the quote is, but he's you say like he's evil in a mundane way. He's also kind of evil in a like with just like his stupidity in a way. Like this kind of stuff that he cares
Yeah,
about is so like keeping a reservation at a restaurant or like
yeah,
complaining about the stuff in his hotel room. It's so self-centered and stupid that it's almost you're and it's kind of true to the world where it's like I don't know I want to or at least I don't know it's very Coen brother
His
type
bubble
of
is so small.
right.
The
yeah.
things that he's thinking about, and I also think it hammers home the fact that he's not thinking about the effects of his job on the world or
Yeah.
Yeah,
anything.
Hmm.
He's just focused on like, am I comfortable in this hotel?
such
Like,
stupid. Right, right.
Yeah.
And self-centered, but he has a line in the latest episode where he says he's showing Francis like the helipad and showing her the helicopter. He says, "Yep, when you're rich, you get to just fly around."
That is
like
just
okay, dude. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
so funny. At the Geek Club 8810 on YouTube asks, how did you build an independent animation studio? And do you have any advice for up and coming independent creators? And I want to couple it with don't ask dog, I guess. Do you have any tips on creating your own animation studio with little to no money? So it's kind of the stuff that you talked about earlier, but
Yeah.
like I guess let's kind of frame it with advice and what would you recommend people to do?
Like, give a
Yeah,
YouTube
I mean,
tutorial on how to do a studio real quick.
well,
In
and I
five
think
minutes.
I do think though, well, I'm curious how you guys feel about this, but I do feel like it's like the time of the independent studio is now, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
the glitch model, these kind of emerging
Hmm.
models with, I don't know, it's like it's a little bit intimidating because I think like if somebody were setting out to say, okay, I'm going to make a pilot for YouTube that's going to follow maybe in the like has been model, like
Hmm.
I don't know, it just I would say that to me feels like a more compelling model if I were young, but like
Yeah.
do it that way because I think places that have a lot of like bloat and overhead are not benefiting from the current like way that things are getting made. And if
Yep.
you're able to like self-generate, quote unquote IP independently, I don't know, you're taking advantage of the fact that what a small group of people can make together is light years better than what it was even 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Somebody's going to kind of like capitalize on that opportunity to some extent. I think we're sort of in the middle where it's like we rent a studio space and we are adhering to some kind of more traditional like industry things, and we're not making content for YouTube, for example. We're working in the industry network side, but that's the stuff where I'm like, when I see people in that space doing interesting stuff, I'm like, I see it as the future. Amazing
Hmm.
Digital Circus isn't my taste necessarily. It's also not for people I'm almost 40, but I'm like, damn, what they're doing is really interesting. And like
Hmm.
now what they're doing with Netflix is interesting me from a quote unquote business perspective to some extent. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also think that it's like I was in this group before called Late Night Work Club that was a group of animators just making like indie shorts. And there was a lot of like, how can I join Late Night Work Club, or how do you start Late Night Work Club? And I feel like there's sort of a feeling of like, I don't know, you start by just doing shit with your friends. It's like get enough friends
Hmm.
together and ta-da, you're a studio. On the other hand, I would say hire a lawyer when you start. That
Oh
we
yeah.
made mistakes, like just like that have now been rectified, but like just like we didn't know what we were doing in certain ways on a very practical level. And I don't know. I would say there's other things like make sure you delineate between if you're doing stuff with friends, have a work channel and have a friend channel, and try to make sure you stay friends and don't let work stuff get in the way of being friends. I feel very fortunate that like I get to work with my best friends and we've remained friends. And I think we have a good, healthy amount of like, we hang out socially still too, even though we work together all day, shit like that, little things like that, that I think that it's like starting a band where I feel like bands fall
Yeah.
apart for dumb ego reasons and for a million reasons basically. And so
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. And I think like being aligned, I think there's always this thing that I try to tell people of like, you got to go all in on a thing when it's not cool yet, because by the time
Mm.
it's cool, every central position is already occupied by the people who went in on it before it was cool. So like,
Mm.
and that the thing that is now cool was deeply uncool for a long time. You know, it's just nothing comes out of the gate as a cool thing. It's you and your friends doing a dumb fool's errand for many years until suddenly everyone goes, damn, how did you do that YouTube short that now has 50 million views? And you go, by not going out at night and being a fucking loser. You know?
Mm.
So and for Green Street, you know, it's like you from this talk you can kind of see that it's like a lot of the stuff that is now the stuff was percolating for a long time. So it's like it just took a lot of patience, you know, and believing in it and just like, you know, if you have an opportunity to make something in a big way and make sure it like makes is compelling and makes a statement or something because it's lucky to get to make that's like I saw this acting advice from Philip Seymour Hoffman where he said, even if you're cast in a shitty small movie, if you have an opportunity to act, like really act, do something big, bring it, like be the standout thing in whatever thing you're in. And don't worry, that'll pay off in
Become the
ways.
main
It'll pay
character on accident.
yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know how many people watch Along Came Polly, but I definitely watched the scene where Philip Seymour Hoffman is playing basketball because it's so fucking funny. And it's like,
Yeah.
now that lives as a YouTube video forever because it's so good. And that stuff will pay dividends forever, I think. Even if it's, again, I think, like we're talking about with the Adult Swim Smalls, like the budgets might not be great. You get that to have that thing forever,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's so true.
And like what a privilege to get to make stuff. You know, it's great.
Right.
So you get to win more than Adult Swim in the long run.
Exactly. No, that's so true. I mean, we love to be like, oh, money, but also like that's, I mean,
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
yeah, wait, but at the same time, we did it because we wanted to make stuff. Like,
Yeah,
if
Sure.
we didn't care about making stuff enough, we wouldn't have
yeah. And I think
taken,
that
yeah,
there's the moment where you say, fucking pay me. You know, like
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
this is where
yeah.
I get paid and I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this because it's my job. So knowing the difference maybe between those two things.
On Newgrounds, we have Brandy Buzel asking, Mr. Buckaloo, Sean Buckaloo of SeanBuckaloo.com. Love your stuff. Big fan of common side effects right now. And was anybody specific responsible for the extra hilarious faces in episode 7? Easily the most times we saw a crazy facial expression reaction, and they were extra this time around. Care
There
to comment?
there is a very specific answer to this question. That yes, it was the director Camille Bosek. You should follow her on Instagram. I think her Instagram is Caramel Afternoon. She is so talented. She's really fantastic. And she just posted some of her boards from episode 7. And she did those really crazy Francis facial expressions. And another example of when she boarded this scene, there's a scene where she's buying a really tiny like Gucci purse. And when these boards came in, everyone was just raving. There were some of the funniest drawings we'd ever seen of like just such specific like breakdown. It's really great. I mean, she is. I'm really in awe of her talent. She's fantastic. She also for trivia, there's a scene in Scavenger's spoiler where this character Sam dies, and she kind of became our ringer storyboard artist. So she did those crazy Francis expressions in 7, and she also boarded the scene where Sam dies because she's just
Whoa.
really she just was the person who it's like if we have a big emotional scene, she's the artist we'd cast on the scene because
That's
she's
so cool.
so good. She's so inspiring.
So cool.
Behind the scenes. Love it.
Let's see. Let's see. Alex Torres asks, I'm always curious with shows like Scavenger's Reign and especially common side effects. Is there a push from higher ups or whatever to make them more quote unquote American adult cartoons in nature? Like, was there pushback on making these story driven animated projects in the field that seems to be hungry for the next Family Guy or Bob's Burgers?
Good question. I mean, I think that like that issue happens more in pitching and development that
Mhm.
like you hear this refrain of kind of like you go into a pitch and you go, oh, I'm working on a thing that's going to be like Twin Peaks and meets the Coen brothers. and everyone goes, great, 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 we love that, we love that. Then you actually do it, and they go, we're really looking more for The Office and Family Guy and Bob's Burgers. And I get that. I mean, like, whatever. I feel like I used to have so much more of a chip on my shoulder about like everyone just wants fucking comedies like The Simpsons. Now I feel like I'm like, I get it. It's family shows are fucking super popular. And I had this thought when I was watching Common Side Effects the other day where I was like, Family Guy is our lead-in show on Adult Swim. So Family Guy plays, you're taking a fat rip on the bong, you're having a good night watching Adult
Oh,
Swim. And then I'm watching, well, then I'm watching, it was when I was watching the episode of Common Side Effects where Frances is feeding applesauce to her catatonic mother. And I'm like, I do see the issue here. This is such a fucking bummer. If you're in a block of comedy, like what a terrible, and you know, it's like, it just is earnestly dramatic in this moment. There's nothing funny about this beat. And so if I think of, in watching it in context with Family Guy, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is totally dissonant and funny ways and whatever. It'll live on Max maybe in its ultimate thing. But no, I mean, I would say once you get past that phase, I think you always get notes to make things funnier. But there was never a moment where they're like, we need you to adjust the art style to make it more like Rick and Morty. It's like that ship would have sailed a long time ago. So and I don't know, it's like I have this theory that like compelling stuff makes up for if a person might have an overriding note. Like for example, this needs to be more funny if you're pervasively getting that note. And then you turn in a scene like Frances feeding applesauce to her mother, and it's just really good in the animatic. People don't note a thing that they're like compelled by, even if it's not totally what they are expecting necessarily. This is my theory that like you're not going to note a thing where you like it. So I felt like it was always like get over the hurdle of the note you might get by just making it fun to watch and good, you know, which is easier said than done and didn't always work, obviously. But but then yeah, I don't know. You know, it's more like if you're pitching to Fox, yeah, it's got to be in that rubric of hard family comedy, you know, like Bob's Burgers or Family Guy. That's what they make, and that's what they're expecting. If you pitch them a Common Side Effects, I think they would just say no.
It's so true. I think it's like pitching to the network it's so specific. Like you have to know kind of what the brand of the network is, and
Yeah.
there's no other way around just to watch like, and if you can't watch all of the shows that are on that network, at least like knowing all the titles and watching the pilots. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like
And I think that those things also it's tricky because I also sometimes feel like places don't know what they want.
yeah.
Our mandate is hard funny, but then if it's a good idea that they go, well, this can work too, you know.
right.
Hmm.
So like don't let that stuff discourage you because it's all everyone's afraid.
That's so true.
Everyone's operating out of a place of fear.
All right.
Um,
What I wanted to ask you, our the title question of our podcast. What do you do when you have creative block? Do you get creative block? Do you have methods? What do you do?
I get creative block all the time. And I think that I have this funny thing where I used to think that walks would help me on a creative block. It's the most classic fucking answer. But like I have this thing now where for a few years I feel like I'll go on a walk and I'll be like, I have a creative problem I'm trying to solve, and I'm gonna fucking solve it on this walk. And then I go for the walk and I'm like, solving it. And then I come back and I haven't solved it. There's this Onion headline that I think about with creative block where it's like a guy holding up like a sleepy time tea with the like bear on it. And
Uh-huh.
the headline is this sleepy time tea better fucking work. And I think about that for creative block. I will say consistently the best creative block is if I have a framework for some kind of kernel of an idea. Let's say that is I think often where, you know, if I say dolphin show, you know, dolphin or whatever, then I'll find mostly nonfiction books that are in that range, sometimes fiction, but like nonfiction books that are on a related subject. Like for example, when I was doing the FX shorts, I had the Roomba pretty early, but I didn't have the other two. And then I bought this book called Robots and Humans that was just about sort of like ethical questions related to like cutting edge AI. And it was like an answer, it'll reveal itself surely one way or another. Whether and it can come down to just almost like a word triggers the idea, but you need to be reading a book to encounter the word that unlocks something. But it can also be, I was reading that book and it said that it's still not legally worked out who's responsible when a self-driving car kills somebody. If there's and specifically that an Uber did kill somebody, and Uber paid a settlement to the victim's family, but also in paying the settlement said we are not responsible. Like this payment does not represent culpability. So it's still, I think, a gray area. So it was like, okay, I encounter that in a book, and then it's what's the short there? What's the character? Okay, it's self-driving car. Okay, what's what's the and then it was like, so that happens. You go, okay, it's some scenario like that. A self-driving car hits somebody, but I don't necessarily have the voice of the character. And then somebody that my wife had met said that described themselves as an empath. And then it was like everybody who just self-describes as an empath is definitely a sociopath. And so I was like, okay, that there's part two is it's the
They're
like
trying to come off like they have feelings.
exactly,
Extra.
exactly. Yeah. Like I'm
It's
very sensitive, I'm an empath, and you go, you're definitely gonna kill me.
it's so funny how that recently became it I so there's like a psychology, like pop psychology will have these words that become like in vogue, I guess. And like it was last year that
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
empath
yeah, I
and
know exactly what.
narcissist
Yeah.
all over the place. All over the place. It took off like crazy.
It's like
And
what big thing brought those words into popular consciousness
yeah,
that then everyone is thinking through the paradigm of am I an empath or am I a
yeah.
sociopath?
Yeah, and
Why?
are they using that word to enable the behaviors of like, oh, I freak out at everything because I'm an empath and everything affects me, but that's
Exactly.
Yeah.
okay
Yeah.
because I'm an empath. You know, it's like
It's
an
like therapy speech
empowering,
to yeah, therapy speech to explain just being an asshole.
empowering
Yeah,
toxicity
yeah.
Yeah.
through self-diagnosis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but that's just one that I remember of like problem, solution. I'll watch movies too a lot and like have a notebook and just be like, watch a movie you've already seen that you think might trigger something. I think I need to be in like a passive state of mind. Then it's like I'm not forcing it, it just comes.
You're ready to
And
receive.
yeah, get ready to receive. I think the world offers better solutions than you can come up with on your own. Like there's sort of a truth
Mhm.
is stranger than fiction part of it where I'm like
Mhm.
the reality of situations is absurd in a way that I think can inspire funny scenarios. And then I think you do like I feel like I have a thing where like then when there's a strong net, a lot of ideas can get caught in it, like where it's like, but trying to create like here's three strong axis points for what I'm trying to do. Now a bunch of things can trickle in and add to the pot and yeah, something like that. But
I like the way you phrase that that you said you try to be in a passive state, and I think that's the best way that encapsulates all of these like, sometimes very like nitty-gritty answers like, oh God, take a shower, take a nap,
right.
like, and it's like, no, that's what it is. It's like you have to push yourself to observe and receive. That's
Yeah, you have to
really
be sort
clever.
of zoned out, but
Yeah.
also ready to receive because I feel
Hmm.
like you need to be like, oh, it just struck like lightning, and I'm ready to like
Hmm.
capture it and push push the kernel out to
Yeah.
maybe the furthest extent of like what's the end point of what that is, you know?
Yeah, and this is something only other jocks like me will understand. But you can run around the end zone all you want, but if you're not ready to catch that ball, you're not gonna score.
That goes.
You have to put your arms out.
I think that's true.
I think that's so poignant of me to say.
Uh, Did you say
A
the
gripping sports metaphor.
gripping
Yeah, a
sports
gripping
metaphor?
sports metaphor. Yeah.
Did Wayne Gretzky actually say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take?
I don't
I've
know.
I
I've heard that attributed to Gretzky, but then somebody told me that that is a misquote, and so I didn't want to say it, but I think that's also true.
how many
Yeah,
shots? Let me see.
I know there's that other saying that when you let your friends exploit you, you don't work a day in your life, or something like that. And that's
When
Was
you
another
let
that's
your
another
friends
good one.
exploit you,
Oh no, when you exploit your friends and you're
ah, you don't
working,
work a day in your
you
life.
don't work a day in your life.
That's
I'm
pretty
not sure.
good.
I'm not sure how the saying goes, but
I mean,
something like that.
don't you think there's also I mean, an earnest creative block thing is like let yourself do shitty things, like allow for the shitty things to be excised because you might need to do 10 shitty things before the good thing actually arrives. So I don't know. Like people are hard on themselves, I think, these days. Um, but I don't know. I've written 25 pages of a script that suck ass, and I needed to get through it just to jog the whole thing, and like
Yeah,
it's a process of discovery, but if you don't let yourself suck, you'll never get to the not suck part.
I agree.
Yeah,
There
very
you go.
true. Well, that's the end of this creative block. Sean, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Do you have anything that you would like to promote? Anything we should look out for? Any ways we should support you?
I'm going to promote one thing that if for anyone who's living in LA, which hopefully is a contingent of listeners, I am doing I'm curating an animation program with the Los Angeles Festival of Movies,
Whoa.
which I haven't done curating in a little bit, but it's a program of international animated short films that's great. And some really exciting titles. You can see them on the Los Angeles Festival of Movies website, and the tickets go on sale on March 17th. So I don't know when this is going to come out, but
Oh, cool.
tickets will be on sale, and it's on April 5th, and it'll be fun. And you guys should come as well. But
Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh, I want to go. I want to go. Those are so fun. You curated
oh yeah, you came to the Animation
yeah.
Now. So that was Animation Now. This one is Animation Today.
You got to make a future one.
Yeah, animation.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
and it's just like encoded data
Yeah.
flashing at you.
So I'm also going to thank our listeners. Follow us on social media at SheRTV Block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast, Marco for helping us produce the show, and Ibuka for creating the short clips we've been putting onto the internet.
If you love our show, you can support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews, access to our Discord community, and also because our episodes are so long and the algorithm doesn't really like that, we are shortening them, and all the extra content goes on the Patreon. So check that out. Click the link in the description of this episode to follow Sean on all his socials and to find our Patreon. I've been your host, V.
And I was other Sean. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.